Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to AfterCLIMB. As you know, AfterCLIMB is that session where we do a deep dive into a specific area of our products and services. And today I'm going to do a deep dive into inventory counting. Now, if you haven't seen the January and February AfterCLIMB events, you'll need to go back and watch those, because you can watch this and it'll make some sense to you, but this builds on the previous two. And so it'll make more sense, I think, after you watch January and February. Okay, I have my video off. You've seen me enough, and I want to maximize the screen real estate as I'm going through the demo, so that's why that's off. I'm also will answer any questions at the very end. Okay, so let's get started here. Let's talk about inventory counting considerations. And first of all, I need to say that inventory counting is really the last tool in the POS system that you should use. So that begs the question, what's first? Well, first of all, you just need to make sure all of the items are in your system. So having a clean, good database is absolutely key to success. And that also means having accurate retails and costs. It really doesn't do you much good to do an inventory count if you don't have costs in, because you're going to see you have 10 of this item at zero cost. There's no inventory value. So you really need to be using the tools within our product to make sure that your database is clean, consistent, and accurate. Then you also need to make sure that you're using shelf labels, that your pricing is decoupled from your receiving, and you're no longer stickering items. The days of bringing the totes from the drug wholesaler, opening it, pulling out the sheets of stickers and items, stickering every individual item, those should be long gone if you're using the tools of our system. And definitely, if you're still doing that, you need to get rid of doing that before you ever think about going on and doing inventory counting. Also, you should be processing price update files where possible. So we have a vendor EDI program that works with all of the drug wholesalers. So you should be processing price updates there, and again, decoupling from the receiving. And my recommendation to everyone is always do price updates monthly. You can do them as frequently as you want. I think monthly is plenty. But again, that's outside the scope of today's discussion. I'll be talking about that in a future session. And then you should be using purchasing and receiving effectively, because if you're not using purchasing and receiving effectively and you're not receiving items properly, then what value is doing inventory? Because you're not doing the receiving right, so the inventory is going to be off immediately. So you need to have those processes in place and well understood and the right people trained so that that's happening like clockwork on a daily basis. And then I would also suggest to you that you should be using the product reports to make business decisions at this point, before you ever even consider doing inventory counts. 80% of the value of your point of sale comes by just simply making good business decisions based on the reports that you have at your fingertips. So if you've never run the items with no sales report, as an example, you should be running that regularly and getting rid of the items that absolutely don't sell in your store. You have data anomaly reports that will help you find the items that don't have correct costs and don't have retails and those kinds of things. Those kinds of reporting really should be first and foremost before you move to the next step for inventory counting. But let's say that you're ready to do some inventory counting. So let's talk about what are the considerations once you decide it's time to start. Well, what's the best approach? I get asked this all the time. And that really depends. There's really not a one-size-fits-all approach to inventory counting. It depends on the size of your front end. It depends on your staffing levels. It depends on whether or not you plan on doing counts during business hours or when the store is closed. Those are the kinds of things that make a difference. And even you know that isn't always going to be the same. So you need to be flexible. And we have a great team here that can answer those questions and help design the best approach for your environment. But I'm going to teach you some of the best practices and show you some of the functionality that we have that can help you. And also, I'll give you some recommendations on how to do this. And I'm going to actually walk you through the entire process using what I consider to be the best approach. But once again, no one-size-fits-all approach, and we'll help you design the approach that fits your needs and your environment. So Perpetual versus annual. Annual is that horrible situation where you count the entire store once a year, all in one fell swoop. Everybody hates it, and the inventory count is not very accurate compared to the other option, perpetual. And what's really the difference? Well, perpetual, you're just counting all the time, but you're just counting in small, just a little tiny bit of the store at any given time. A lot of stores, the size of a lot of stores, allow them to count like a 4-foot section on a daily basis. And you have a couple of different people that do it. Nobody gets sick of it because it takes 10 or 15 minutes to do, and it's just part of the daily routine, but it's not, I'm sitting there for 8 hours doing some mind-numbing counting. So in perpetual, you want to plan on counting the entire store at least twice a year, but the more, the better. The more accurate you're going to be. The difference between basic and advanced inventory control, I talked about this last month, so I'm not going to go into the difference between them, but I do need to point out that if you're on advanced inventory control, that you need to make sure before you start your count on any of those items that that holding tank is empty. And for those of you on advanced inventory control, you know what that means. So, but just make sure you've done that before you start your counts. And then the question of, should we do bin locations or not? Well, we teach bin locations to everybody from the beginning. If you have a really small front end, then I think you can get away without doing bin locations, but I would argue that bin locations are really useful. The stores that are doing it really love it, because it makes things easier. It definitely makes putting out shelf labels easier because you can print your price update, your prices. You can print those new shelf labels in bin location order, so you're walking right down the aisle and the labels are in the order that the products are out there on the aisle. Also, when you're doing inventory counting, you can do counts by bin location, which is what I'm actually going to show here in just a few minutes. Now, what are bin locations for those of you who don't know, just so we're on the same page as I'm discussing this? Let's pretend, so this is, you see these different shelving units. So each of the 4-foot shelving units would be a different bin location, not the shelves themselves. So this shelf versus this shelf versus this shelf wouldn't be a different bin location, but this section versus this section versus this section would be a different bin location, just as a general rule. So, and then you can use whatever kind of convention you'd like. For instance, when I see something on a wall, I usually label the wall. So south wall, for instance. So I might make my bin location for everything here. If this was the first 4-foot section in the south wall, I might make my bin location SW for south wall 01, and this SW02 and SW03 and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to show just in Product Manager where you do bin locations and how that convention's done, and then I'm going to get right into inventory counting. But the next thing that I want to talk about is having the proper tools. So having a scanner that you can use to scan the item, put in the quantity, scan the next item, put in the quantity, scan the next item, that is the fastest and easiest way to do inventory counting. And if you're really serious about inventory counting, getting one of these tools is the way to go. This is our new Android device. We have application on here. This is a commercial device, so it's can be dropped without breaking. You'll notice they're the same device, but the one on the right has this trigger grip with a trigger on it, and that just and then the scanner is built in. So you're not trying to use a camera on the Android device. There's actually a scanner built into this, so you can just pull the trigger and scan. And it really makes things fast. And I'm going to demo that. So you're going to see the screen. You're going to see me scan. You're going to see all that in action here in just a moment. So let's get into the product. And I'm going to start in the Product Manager just to show you where bin locations are. So here's a Maalox product, and down here in the inventory counting area, there's the bin locations. So this particular one is in bin location 0103. And you create the naming convention. These are ideas that we teach, but it just has to make sense to you. So I've created for my aisles, I use 01 for aisle 1, 02 for aisle 2, so forth. And then the 4-foot section, or, in some cases, the 3-foot section. So 0101 would be aisle 1, section 1. 0102 would be aisle 1, section 2. I did the walls, the wall north, section 1, wall north, section 2, wall south, section 1. So you just map out the store. We help you with this, or you can do it on your own. But it's a convention that makes sense to you, that you can look at and go, okay, that I understand how we've labeled our store. And you can create a map with the labels as well. Okay, so we have tools that you can use to get these bin locations in. That's going to be a different topic for a different day, because today we're about inventory counting. So we're going to assume that those bin locations are in and that we're going to be able to count by bin location. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to inventory control and into inventory counting. Now, some of you have very, very limited front end, and I think it still makes sense for you to count those items. But it may not make sense for you to spend the money on buying one of these Android devices. So in that case, the very low-tech way that any of you can count is to come in here and do a count sheet. So you're in inventory control, and then you can query the database. And what you would do in real life is that you would just say that I want to print everything that I carry. I'm going to just do one fine line just to show you what this looks like. And the way that we set up our system is that when we bring in that product file, we set everything that is in that product file to inactive, and then as you sell items, they're activated. As you receive items, they're activated, and as you count items, they're activated. So I'm also going to suggest to you that you can, at this point, skip the inactive items, so you're only getting count sheets for the items you actually carry. And we're going to click next here. And I'm just going to do this one fine line just so that we can speed this along, and I can show you what a count sheet looks like. So I'm going to select all the items and click next, and I'm going to print my count sheet, which I'll show to the screen here. And you'll note that I've got the items sorted by bin location, and then I can write in the count, and then I have a barcode. So I can walk the aisle, do my count manually, and then come back into inventory counting, scan this barcode and enter the quantity, scan this barcode and enter the quantity. So this is the very low-tech way that our system would provide for you to be able to do inventory counting. And again, not something you're going to want to do for a large store, but it could work perfectly well for a store with a small front end. Now, another way to do this without the handheld device is to actually, if you have a laptop and with a scanner attached to it, you could put the laptop on a cart and go down the aisle and simply scan the item and enter the quantity, scan the item and enter the quantity. That's also a solution that you could use. Now, those of you that are really going to be doing inventory regularly, that's still a slower solution. So if you want to be effective with your time and have the best overall experience, then I would suggest to you the device that I showed, and then the following method. So when you first go in, it's going to ask you for parameters, and so if you're what you decide here depends on whether or not the store is open or not. So if you're going to be doing your counts while the store is open, I want you to think about this for a second. When you're doing a count, the count doesn't actually update into the system until you finalize it down here, F8. So let's say that you're counting for 2 hours. Well, during that 2-hour period, if the store's open, you're counting, and you counted that you have this mail auction, you have 3 of them. And so you're moving on, and you've been counting, and you did that. That was the first thing you counted. You've been doing it for a couple hours, and somebody walks up and grabs one of those mail boxes, takes it to the register, and they buy it. Now there's only 2 on the shelf, but when you count it, there were 3. And when you finalize this, it's going to say 3. So that's a problem. So there's only 2 ways to solve that. One of the ways is don't do counts while the store's open. Well, for most of you, that's not a realistic thing. Some of you may choose to do that where you say, we're not open on Sunday, we're just going to do a count on Sunday. That's fine. But if you want to do this while the store's open, we have a solution for you, and that's called snapshot. So by doing a snapshot, what happens is when you create this, and you'll see this in a moment, it's going to take a snapshot of the inventory at the moment in time that you started this. And then, of course, so let's say we did it right now. Well, so now every time you sell something, of course, our system is tagging the time that you sell it. And every time you receive something, it's tagging the day and time you sell it. And when you scan it, the scanner is tagging the day and time you scanned it. So when, let's say that you've been scanning for a couple of hours and you go finalize, well, the system is going to go, okay, I scanned this item. There were 3 at 8:01. I sold another one. I sold one at 8:05. And so when you finalize it, it's going to go, okay, I had 3. I sold 1. I know now only have 2. So the system will do all the internal math to make sure that your inventory is accurate. So that's why we recommend snapshot. And when you do a snapshot, you do also something called a count set. So I've created one count set already, but I'm going to show you how you create a count set and what you can do with it by creating another one. So my first count set I've done by bin location, and I'm looking at bin locations 0101 through 0103. My second count set, I'll go ahead and do the wall north, whoops, and or just go wall north and then wall north. Now, when you do a count set, you can do it by type. So you can say, I want to do a specific vendor or vendors. I could do departments, fine lines. We talked about bin locations. That's what we recommend to you. And so I'll do bin location here. And then down here, I can put in the range of bin locations that I want to do. So I'm going to do wall north 01 through wall north 02. And I'm going to click OK. It's going to ask me if I want to create a snapshot. And so now it's created a snapshot for wall north. Okay, so now I'm going to use my handheld device. So I'm going to bring that up on the different screen here. And so here's the handheld device. Here's the screen. I have in my hand, I have this triggered device with the pistol grip. And so I'm going to go ahead and go right into inventory counting, that second one down on the left. It's going to ask me if I want to use a count set, so I'm going to say yes. Then I'm going to choose my count set. I'm going to do the aisle 1 count set, and I'm going to click OK. And now I'm ready to scan. So I'm going to go ahead and scan some items here. Let me get my correct sheet. So I'm going to scan some items. So I scan the item, and then it asks me for the quantity. Now, the quantity that you're seeing on the left, let me use my cursor. This quantity is not what the system is showing as the on-hand quantity. That's just, this is the quantity you're going to add. So if I go, and I'm going to put 3 here, and hit the little, and then press this button here. I'm doing that with my finger, but I just want to point it with the pointer. So now notice what happens. It changes this to 0, moves the 3 into here. Now, even though it looks like if you scanned, it would scan into here, the way the scanner is set up is the next item I scan is going to pop up. So I'm going to scan another item. And now I'm right there in the quantity, so I can go 1 quantity, and now I scan the next item, and I go 2 quantity, and I scan the next item, and I can put in, 3 quantity. And so I just keep on going and going and going. Scan, enter, quantity, scan, quantity, scan, quantity. Now, let's say, that I, later on I'm going down and I get further down, I get to an end cap, and I scan the same item that I've already scanned. Okay, so notice what's going on here. This is an item that I scanned previously, and that's why there's a 1 here. Okay, so when I was on the shelf, in the first place I ran into it on the shelf, I scanned it and there was only 1 of them. This time I'm finding it again, and let's say I find 1 more. Instead of, so when I put in that 1 and hit enter, look what happens. It's additive. Now this is a parameter that we can turn off so that it's not additive. It would override it. But in most cases, we find that you would want it to be additive, right? They could be in multiple places on the shelf. This stops you from having to go, okay, geez, this is in 3 places. How am I going to make this work? So that's how this works. So we just count and we go and we count everything and put in our quantities. And when we're done, let's say, well, so when we're done, we'll say save and exit. Okay. Now, so now we're done. Okay. Let's say that I've decided from my count set that I'm only doing 1 bin location a day, but I have my count set. I've said that my count set's going to be this entire aisle that has 6 bin locations in it. So I'm going to do this over the course of 6 days. That's fine, okay? Because remember, we did a snapshot. And so the system took the inventory of all 6 bin locations on the day that we did the date and time we did the snapshot. Now, tomorrow, I come back. So let's say that I did my first bin location. Tomorrow, I come back in, and I'm ready to count again. I now can go back to inventory counting. I click count set. I go back to my original count set, the one that I'm still working on. And now I start counting my next bin location. Okay, so I'll count, put in 2, count, put in 6, count, or scan, put in 2, and so forth. And I just keep going, right? And now I'm done with that. So at the end of when I'm done finally, I say, okay, I'm all finished. So I get out of inventory control, and now it's time to go to the inventory counting module. And so we wouldn't be starting in here, so let me just back right out. So we come back into Star Plus and we go to inventory counting. And we say, okay, we're going to do snapshot, and we're picking that count set that we finished. So now we come here and we click and we go, okay. And so we now have loaded our count set that we're finished with. We go to the second screen at this point, and the very first thing, there's 2 different ways to go about this, but the way I like to go about it is I first come to uncounted. You're going to love this. So I click uncounted, and what it does is it looks and tells me, hey, you say you finished your count set, but I show 27 items that have an inventory that you didn't count. So you can actually come here and print this and click preview. And it's now going to count, it's going to give you a uncounted count sheet that shows you the item, the fine line, the item, the UPC, the description, the bin location, what it shows is on file, and then you can walk out there and mark, and then do the count. Now, what it might show you though is you go, look at this, all these items from bin location 0103 that didn't get counted, and then you realize, oh, you know what? I got interrupted. I totally forgot that I hadn't finished counting 0103, or I didn't even count 0103. Now you can actually go back out. You can go back, use the scanner, and count bin location 0103. So once you have finished, and this is the beauty of the inventory counting system. Once you've done and you say, okay, I've run that report, I can't find those items, let's say that there were only 5 on there on that sheet, you go, yeah, we just don't have those items anymore. You don't actually have to do anything with those items, because when you get to this next step, when you get to the final step of finalize, whoops, sorry, I forgot one step here. So the first thing you have to do is bring in the information from that Android device. So I'm going to click OK here, and I'm user 2, so you could have multiple users, multiple devices. In this case, we only have the one. And you'll notice that I show 2 sessions. So before I started this demo, I did a session so that I would have one. So let's import the first session. So here's the first session that I imported. Now let's bring in the second session. And so now it's added those things. It's always going to give me at the end of that, it's going to give me a warning message reminding me that if I want to do more counting, I need to go back into inventory counting and do it before I finalize. Otherwise, I'm going to lose the information. That's all it's telling me is just if you don't go back and count your complete count set before you finalize, then it's going to start zeroing things out. Okay. Now, I already showed you uncounted. Importing gets it onto the screen. Uncounted knew about it already because it knows what's in those sets. And now I can go ahead and finalize. So when I do that finalization, it's going to come up, and if it has items that haven't been counted that are on hand, it's going to tell you that. There are items in the snapshot that were not counted and will be zeroed out. Are you sure you want to continue? So at this point, I can say yes, and I'll preview this. And the first report it's going to give me is it's going to show me all of the items, what was counted, what the snapshot count was. This is actually the holding tank quantity for those that are on advanced inventory control, and I mentioned to make sure it's cleared. So you should always see 0 here. What the difference is, the average cost, the extended, the adjustment, since all of these are negatives. So you're seeing that you're going to have a negative adjustment of 504.70 in this case, which hopefully isn't a realistic, isn't going to happen to you in a very small in a small department or a small aisle. This is just because we didn't count everything, right? But this shows you what it's going to do. So anything that it has on hand that you didn't count, it's going to get zeroed out automatically, so you don't have that extra work to do. So you can print this, provide this to your accountant in the end, and then you're going to get a second report, and that report is the uncounted report. Now, this particular one not only shows you the items that it zeroed out, but it also shows you the items that were 0. So this just shows you at the end of the day, as soon as I click X out of here, all of these are going to become 0. And then you can always go into those items and if you need to make any adjustments. Okay, that is the quick and dirty of inventory control, and I'm going to open it up to questions. And once again, before I finish this, I just want to reiterate to you, there are so many different ways to go about it. The last example that I used is really the best practice, and if it worked, we would recommend that to you. But if you have any questions, we have subject matter experts that can really walk you through this and design a project for you that works for you. One of the things that I didn't mention that I always recommend is just calendar it. I love the idea of somebody walking and doing inventory every single day for like 15 to 20 minutes, and just calendar what bin location they're going to do and who's going to do it, and teach them to do it. And it can take 10 or 15 minutes to do a 4-foot bin location. So you're just constantly doing it over and over and over. And I think that's really the best approach. So now I'm opening it up to questions.